was telling both Sister Linda and Sister Catherine, a practice in our community has been, especially in the days when novices and postulants couldn't talk to the professed sisters, we would say to each other, "Praise be Jesus Christ." And the other sister would respond, "Now and forever, amen." Well, that's kind of what you're doing all the time too. Here is you're meeting the Christ in another and wishing the blessing to the Christ in the other. Now, if we really got brave, we would say in the German, "Gelobt sei Jesus Christus in Ewigkeit, Amen." So it was fun as a novice to practice that because we weren't talking, but we were sharing a greeting, which was very important for us. And I share that with you because I think this afternoon we're going to be talking more about the shadow side of humility. Because I think that's where most of our real inner work happens. The others are good safeguards, but humility is one of those basic places. And the way we're going to do this, I'm going to do a little Lectio with you this afternoon and look at how Lectio is a process of looking at the shadow side of humility. Okay? It might sound far-fetched to you, but hopefully it'll make sense. When we begin with Lectio Divina, which St. Benedict wove into the daily rhythm of monastic life, it's not just the reading of scripture, but it's a slow, prayerful listening with the ear of the heart. This practice becomes a sacred space where the shadow can surface gently and be met with compassion. When we listen that gently, it's not a scary deal then to start looking at our faults or our misinformation or any of the things that we look at. When I studied for my master's in spirituality, I had Adrian von Kamm as my main professor. Some of you may recognize that name from the past. He was a Spiritan father who taught at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. And he would say to us, the issues you have as a child become more so when you're elderly. Yeah. And that was a practice that he would have us reflect on. So he said, as a younger person, then I really encourage you to look at what those shadow things are in your story, from your background, or the hurts you experienced, or the way in which you learn to talk with people or respect people. When you're elderly, it comes in tenfold. So I've always been worried about that because when I grew up with 8 brothers, we didn't always have the cleanest language. When I came to the convent, I had to unlearn all the bad words I had learned. Guess what I'm afraid of is going to come out when I get baby? Or the words that are so buried deep inside of me. And I share that. It's a crazy little story, but there are so many other things that we did as children that come back to visit us at this time in our lives. So let's look at the 4 movements of Lectio and how it can help us integrate humility and shadow. St. Benedict's teaching on humility, especially in chapter 7 of the rule, invites a radical honesty before God and community. Radical, which means going to the root of the issue. Radical takes root as its basis. It's a radical honesty. It's not a purging kind of honesty, but it's a kind where we go back and to look at what our life was founded. If we knew love, we have many more resources. If we knew abandonment, there's another kind of resource that happens for us. If we knew hatred, if we knew jealousy, if we knew any of the vices, those are the things that radically, from the root, need to be removed from our stories. So I just invite you to ponder that a little bit. As I said this morning, he outlined the 12 steps or the 12-step ladder to humility. I'm not going to review those this afternoon. It begins with the fear of God and culminates in deep interior peace where one is no longer driven by self-will. It is driven by love. Love that we learn at a deeper level when we hand over our story, our life, our gifts, our talents, our struggles to God. This journey requires confronting the self in all its dimensions. Welcoming the shadow, a concept often associated with Jungian psychology, means acknowledging the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. I can still see our psych professor. Every day he had us sit at our little, we had typewriters in those days because this was in the 70s, and he had us type just flow of consciousness for 20 minutes every day. And at the end of the week, we handed off our writings to him. Boy, that was pretty scary because he didn't know how he was going to interpret those deep shadows. But you know what? It opened me up to say, these are the things I struggle with inside that anybody else may not know or see in me. But it helped me to identify what those were. So what are those? Our fears, our pride, our envy, or hidden wounds. And I say hidden because sometimes things happen to us that's through nobody's fault. They happened. We were hurt. We were wounded. And it takes a lifetime sometimes to get beyond all of that hurt. Benedict doesn't use that language, but his rule certainly gestures toward it. The steps of humility call us to recognize our limitations, confess our faults, and submit to correction. In doing so, we're not repressing the shadow, but gently integrating it through obedience, silence, and self-awareness. For example, the fourth step, patiently enduring difficulties and injustice, asks us to sit with discomfort rather than react. You know, those things where it just kind of niggles at you and you don't know why. Instead of blaming the other, saying, why is that getting me in this spot today? What's going on? Where do I trust God in all of this? Or where does life kind of say, it's not all perfect, Kathleen. It's not all perfect. The fourth step says, patiently endure difficulties, asking us to sit with discomfort rather than react. That's the shadow work that we're talking about here. The sixth step, being content with the lowest and most menial tasks. You know, there can be some pride even in doing that, peeling the potatoes rather than serving the fruit. It's hard to admit those lowly tasks have to be done by somebody out of love for the community. We used to tease about, did you get to scrub the toilets or did you get to clean the stairs? Which were your jobs when you were in formation? And how did your directors decide what was going to be your task? There was always something getting at that shadow side of ourselves. These menial tasks challenge our ego's need for recognition. When I grew up in my large family, there was no task below anybody's doing. And we all learned to love it and respect each other. Sometimes we messed it up, but then you had somebody other there to help you fix it up with what you messed up. Benedict's humility isn't about self-loathing. It's about truthfulness, which includes embracing the parts of ourselves that need healing. So I'm going to talk about how this relates to Lectio. When you do Lectio and have in mind the shadow side, these are some insights you may gain. In Lectio, and you're the experts at it, not me, you read a passage slowly, attentively, and a word or a phrase may stir discomfort or resistance. That's often where the shadow peeks out. For example, love your enemies might surface buried anger or fear. I've heard a lot of people trying to pray for our president right now. He is seen as an enemy. He needs our support even more than those who are trying to do what we believe is the right way. But boy, is that hard to do. And admitting it and still doing the task of praying. Meditatio or meditation. You reflect on that word or phrase. Why did it strike you? What does it reveal about your inner landscape? This is where humility enters in, not to judge, to listen honestly. And then there's oratio or prayer. You respond to God from the heart. This might be a cry for healing, a confession, or a plea for courage. I love those concepts that come through here. A confession, cry for healing, or a plea for courage. It's a moment of vulnerability where the shadow is not hidden, offered. Not hidden, but offered. And then contemplatio or contemplation. You rest in God's presence, allowing grace to hold all that has surfaced. This silent resting is where transformation begins, not by effort, but by surrender. And I say these things in a way of, so often in our past, and maybe in some of yours, scrupulosity was a huge issue in religious communities, where everything became sin or something to say to somebody else that you did wrong. Sometimes that is a prideful thing to do. Sometimes saying, this has been so bad, it cannot be forgiven. I cannot forget is the healthier, safer, better response. So I invite you to think about it both ways. It's acknowledging the hurt or the pain, but it's also saying what is mine to forgive and what is others to forgive or change their response to. Okay, I've shared those four again, and you're very well aware of those. I'm going to use a Rumi reading as a reflection piece. I'm going to read it once, pause, and see if any of these things stir up anything in you. And then I'm going to read it a second time, and we'll pause again. Okay? This is from a book entitled Love Poems from God, 12 Sacred Voices from the East and West by Daniel Landisky. The title of the reflection I'm going to read, That Lives in Us. That lives in us. If you put your hands on this ore with me, they will never harm another and they will come to find they hold everything you want. If you put your hand on this oar with me, they will no longer lift anything of your mouth that might wound your precious land, that sacred earth that is your body. If you put your soul against this oar with me, the power that made the universe will enter your sinew from a source not outside your limbs, but from a holy realm that lives in us. Exuberant is existence, time a husk. When the moment cracks open, ecstasy leaps out and devours space. Love goes mad with the blessing, like my words give. Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and future? The mind that tries to shape tomorrow beyond its capacities will find no rest. Be kind to yourself, dear, to our innocent follies. Forget any sounds or touch you knew that did not help you dance. You will come to see that all evolves. That lives in us. Wise words of Rumi. If you put your hands to this oar with me, they will never harm another, and they will come to find they hold everything you want. If you put your hands on this oar with me, they would no longer lift anything to your mouth that might wound your precious land, that sacred earth that is your body. If you put your soul against this oar with me, the power that made the universe will enter your sinew from a source not outside your limbs, but from a holy realm that lives in us. Exuberant is existence, time a husk. When the moment cracks open, ecstasy leaps out and devours space. Love goes mad with the blessings, like my words give. Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and future? The mind that tries to shape tomorrow beyond its capacities will find no rest. Be kind to yourself, dear, to our innocent follies. Forget any sounds or touch you knew that did not help you dance. You will come to see that all evolves in us. Touch into what happens inside of you. Is there a word, a phrase, a concept that kind of niggles at you or gives you great joy? That says, oh, I wish I had known that 100 years ago, or I wish I knew it today. What stirs in you when you do Lexio in that fashion? In community life, the same rhythm plays out in relationship. The rule calls for mutual obedience, bearing with one another's weaknesses, and receiving correction with love. These are daily invitations to humility and to shadow work. When someone irritates us, or when we're asked to do something menial, the ego flares. But Benedictine life says, stay, listen, let grace do its quiet work. Community life has a way of holding up the mirror we didn't ask for, right? But often needed. One of the things that Adrian von Kamm used to say is, step outside yourself and watch. Watch how you react. Watch how you see certain people. Pay attention to what comes at you. That's the beginning of wisdom. If we're able to see it from a distance, looking in. In the quiet of solitude, we might imagine ourselves as being patient, generous, and humble. But in the shared rhythm of daily life, especially in intentional or spiritual communities, our shadow shows up in the most unexpected ways. The way in which she says those words, the way in which she's always 2 steps behind us in prayer, the way in which she always takes the best piece off the table, the best piece of meat, or the best piece of fish, or whatever. Those small irritations are symbols and signals of how God yet has not entered fully into our lives. That's humility, getting down to the root of it all and saying, what does it matter? Really, what does it matter? But the irritation. You wish somebody would be quieter. You wish somebody would speak up. You wish. That's part of the struggle. Maybe it's the irritation that flares when someone doesn't follow through, revealing hidden need for control, or the envy that stirs when another's gifts are praised, exposing our unspoken hunger for affirmation. Even the impulse to fix others can be a shadow in disguise, masking our discomfort with vulnerability or indifference. I like to talk about these kinds of things, especially when we have a community of people who've lived religious life for many, many years. We think we're past some of these crazy things that we do to ourselves. Life gets simpler, less complicated. Some of these things kind of like cream on a pail of milk come to the fore. And it's the time to say, I'm still not in Jesus' hands totally. I do not trust fully God's love for me. I need to pay attention. Some of us, as we age, are in such a holy place of knowing that we'll never get it all right. We will be imperfect till the day we die, and it's okay. It's in God's hands. Those people are really blessed in community, and they are a blessing to all of us, too, as we stand in community with each other. One Benedictine sister once said, community is where your rough edges get sanded down. We always talked about the young people coming in, they were diamonds in the rough. Needed to have some kind of polishing to get them to be the gem that they really were. It's not just about friction, but it's about grace. In a healthy community, we're not shamed for our shadow. That phrase really touches me. We're not shamed for our shadow. We're invited to see them, name them, and grow through them. Does your heart kind of want to weep a little bit too, like mine? Yeah. It's not about getting it all right. That's why Benedict insists on mutual obedience and bearing with one another's weaknesses. Not because it's easy, but because it's holy. And sometimes most surprising revelation is this: the shadow isn't only what we dislike in ourselves, it can also be the good we've buried, the courage, creativity, or tenderness we've been afraid to show. In my family, we didn't hug, so I'm not going to hug. Have you ever heard that? I've heard it. And the problem then becomes you're withholding that love which you have because of some old tale that you're still hanging on to. Be free, be creative, share your gifts, your skills, your little nosegays that you share with somebody else. Do the things that give you great pleasure at this time in our lives. Community can call forth that particular gift of creativity and joy. Simple things, simple ways. Do you practice chapter faults yet?
Oh, every day.
No, I have to tell you, we had that practice through my formative years. And it was after Vatican II. So our junior director decided she was going to try a new way of doing chapter of faults. And each of us drew a name out of a hat. And we went off with that person and told them how they were failing in community.
Oh,
Yeah.
whoa,
Bad twist.
bad.
Well, guess who I ended up with? The director.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So as brave as I was, I said to her what she was doing to fail community. And it was by picking out certain people she liked better than others and gave certain jobs to other people. I named a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
We never did it again.
Oh.
Because it was so painful
Yeah,
for her and for all of us. Because it's not what this is all about. And it's one of those practices that are saying, good, it's past. Because it came out of a different era when to correct each other was a grace and not a blessing. So now we try to do the loving things. And in a sense, you're really helping another to honor and to admit their faults or the ways in which they have failed. Do you know the story of the kintsugi bowl, the Japanese bowl? Do you know that practice? Oh, it's a beautiful one. The Japanese have this practice that if a bowl gets broken, instead of destroying it, they put it together with the glue and they put gold or silver or something within that patch. And it becomes something beautiful. And that's kind of what Benedict is inviting you into too. The shadows is what makes you beautiful, makes you unique, makes you you. So I just encourage you to be a Japanese bowl. If you ever want to look it up on the internet, it's really a fascinating story. And it's a profound metaphor, really, of Benedict's humility. Both honor the imperfections not as a flaw to be hidden, but as a sacred space where transformation takes root. And we all come at it different places. In some ways, I think Benedict was more motherly than he was fatherly, in that he wanted everyone to be loved, cared for, and honored. And that's what this whole practice of humility is really all about. In kintsugi, the cracks are not erased but illuminated, becoming part of the object story. St. Benedict's 12 steps of humility invite us to embrace our limitations, to see our faults not as shameful, but as invitations to grace and growth. I invite you, if you want to bring out those values sometime, look at your rule and just say, what have I learned in my life about the gift of these steps that he outlined for you? It's that deep, honest acknowledgement of our dependence on God and one another. If we look at it as that plumbing to the radical root where we are all planted together, it would really be helpful. There's a famous Christian artist by the name Makoto Fujimura who works with kintsugi and describes it as a theology of making. A theology of making, where brokenness becomes beauty through grace-filled restoration. Well, guess what? As we know each other in our deeply flawed place, we make beauty, we make art, we have a theology of care. I think Jesus would have agreed with that whole thing. In both, there's a quiet courage to facing what is fractured, a sacred trust that with time and care, the gold of grace will bind us into something more whole than before. You see why I thought I needed to talk more about the shadow side this afternoon? Because I think that's the place where all of us can stand some real deep love from each other and for ourselves. To really come to that place to say, God has blessed us, has blessed me, and my task is to continue shaping that love for others. So as I close this afternoon, I'm going to read again a summary of what you listened to this morning with David Steingelrath's reflection on blessings. This is how they show up. Cultivate true gratitude. Recognize and appreciate the inherent value of things as they are, even challenges. Find joy in the simple act of being alive. Embrace sparkling humility. Stand tall while acknowledging both your limitations and potential. Honor the interconnectedness of all things, from the earth that sustain you to the dreams that inspire you. Navigate imprecision with grace. Allow space for ambiguity and open-endedness. Recognize the value of both precision and imagination in different situations. Treasure your memories. Learn to retain meaningful experiences and insights while letting go of negativity. Share kindness and let its ripples spread beyond your lifetime. Welcome and savor change. See change as a natural and necessary part of life, offering opportunities for growth and new experiences. Appreciate the fleeting beauty of each moment. And lastly, embrace departures with presence. Accept that goodbyes are an inevitable part of life, making arrivals possible. Be fully present in every moment, appreciating the unique value of each experience. Amen.
Amen.
And before you depart, tomorrow afternoon, because of a conflict that I have, we're going to meet at 3 o'clock instead of 3:30. So you can set your clocks or your mindset. It might mean that you're a little bit shy on your after lunch rest,
Yeah.
but 3 o'clock. I have a conference from 1:30 to 3, and then from 3 to 3:30 I'll be with you, and then 3:45 to 4:30 I'll be with our leadership team. So it's a full afternoon, but I think we can do it all together, right? So
There's
I
a
appreciate
note
it.
in their box already.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I know, it took me a while to get that in there, but I hope this was soon enough for them.
Yes.
But no, there is one, so you can bring it to your room.
Yeah. It's just a half hour difference, that's all.
Yeah.
So, yeah. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Welcome.